So, let's dive into something you've probably felt but couldn't quite put your finger on: the paradox of choice. We're going to explore this really fascinating idea that having more options might actually be making us less happy. You know that feeling, right? You're standing there, staring at a million different options, and your brain just short circuits. You're trying so hard to make the perfect choice, but instead you just end up completely stuck, not choosing anything at all. And it happens absolutely everywhere. You go to buy a simple pair of jeans and bam, you're suddenly trying to figure out the difference between slim, skinny, straight, boot cut. Or just think about the milk aisle. You've got cow's milk, almond, soy, oat, then 1%, 2%, skim. The list goes on and on. It's a lot. And honestly, it's kind of exhausting. Well, guess what? You're not alone in feeling this way. This is a real thing, and it's so common that psychologists actually have a specific name for it. And that name is the paradox of choice. The whole idea here is that having all these options, this abundance we think we want, can actually backfire and hurt our overall sense of well-being. So this psychologist, Barry Schwartz, he's the one who really defined this. He said, look, some choice is good, obviously, but there's a tipping point. Too much choice doesn't make us feel free. It just leads to decision fatigue, a ton of anxiety, and that awful nagging feeling of regret after you finally pick something. He famously laid all of this out in his groundbreaking book. And his big argument is that our modern culture of abundance, this idea that more is always better, can actually end up robbing us of the very satisfaction we're looking for. I mean, Schwartz himself said it perfectly: choice no longer liberates, but debilitates. That just hits the nail on the head, doesn't it? It's not about getting rid of choice entirely, but it's about figuring out that point where it stops helping and starts hurting. Okay, so to really get a handle on this paradox, we need to look at how we, as people, actually approach making decisions. Turns out, most of us tend to fall into one of two main camps. So the big question is, are you a maximizer or are you a satisficer? A maximizer is that person who has to find the absolute best possible option. They'll research every single possibility until they're exhausted. A satisficer, on the other hand, is just looking for something that's good enough, something that checks their most important boxes. Let's use a classic example, right? Buying a car. The satisficer knows they just need a car that's good on gas for their daily commute. They find one that fits the bill and boom, they're happy. Done. The maximizer, though, they're going to compare every single make, model, and trim, digging through reviews for weeks, trying to find that one perfect deal, even if they don't actually need the heated steering wheel or sunroof. Now, you'd think that all that effort the maximizer puts in would lead to better choices and more happiness, right? Well, the research tells a very different story. There's a real hidden cost to always chasing the best. And the studies on this are super clear. Researchers have found that people who score high on what they call the maximization scale also score way higher on regret. They spend so much more time second-guessing themselves, comparing their choices to what other people chose, and just generally feeling less happy about the decision they eventually land on. And here's the real kicker. All that extra work doesn't even mean they get a better result. One study looked at online dating and found that maximizers, who spent forever searching for the one, didn't actually end up with better partners than the satisficers. They just drove themselves crazy with anxiety in the process. Okay, so if being a maximizer is the problem, what's the solution? How do we fix this? Let's talk about some actual practical strategies you can use to make decisions feel less like a chore and more like a simple choice. So here's a really important idea. When you're swimming in a sea of options, just going with your gut isn't always the best play. Research actually shows that using a simple, structured approach, a model, can lead to way better decisions than relying on intuition alone. Let's look at a fascinating real-world example of this. This table shows a super simple rule for judges making bail decisions. It's based on just two things: a person's age and how many times they've failed to appear in court before. That's it. Instead of some complex, subjective judgment, these two factors create a risk score that's been shown to be more accurate than an expert just going on instinct. And the cool thing is, you can use the same logic in your own life. You don't need some complicated spreadsheet. Just figure out the one or two things that really matter to you in any given decision and make a simple rule around them. It just cuts right through all the noise and saves you so much mental energy. All right, here's a toolkit you can start using today. Step 1. Choose when to choose. Seriously, save your brain power for the decisions that actually matter. 2. Create simple rules. Like we just said, pick your 1 or 2 key criteria and stick to them. 3. Consciously decide to satisfy more. Aim for good enough, not perfect. And finally, number 4, practice gratitude. Once you've made a choice, focus on what's good about it, not all the other things you could have chosen. Which kind of brings us to the big final thought here. In a world that gives us infinite options, maybe the real freedom isn't having the power to get the absolute best of everything. Maybe, just maybe, the best choice we can possibly make is to simply choose to be satisfied with what's good enough.